Welcome back to Mapping What Matters, a special Change the Story series exploring how we work with communities to uncover their existing strengths and resources. In this episode, we are joined by Martin Tomitsch, an expert in life-centered design and head of the transdisciplinary school here at UTS. Martin asks, how can we move beyond conventional applications of asset mapping to better plan communities for the future? Together we explore how life-centered design can create spaces for communities to collaborate and thrive.
How can communities collaborate with organizations and governments to create real impact? In the first episode of this series, you heard about asset mapping. This approach was originally developed as part of asset-based community development to uncover community strengths and enable participation. But over time, that original intent has often been diluted through various interpretations and evolving practices. Today, you'll hear how we can move beyond the limitations of conventional asset mapping. How can we use design tools and mindsets that help us see more, connect more, and plan more effectively for the future? How can these approaches help us expand our perspective, understand systems more deeply, and work in ways that are more holistic and future-focused? I'll also walk you through practical steps so you can apply them in your own work. And you can find a list of these steps on the show notes for this episode, as well as the transcript. For a long time, our ways of responding to complex challenges have been focused on the deficits. Experts identified problems and prescribed solutions that they thought were a good fix. In the 1980s, influenced by positive psychology and systems thinking, we saw the rise of more positive and participatory approaches. Take human-centered design, for example, an approach that valued the lived experiences of users and sought to place them at the center of the problem-solving process. But over time, I began to ask, is focusing only on the human enough? What if we shifted our focus beyond just users, customers, and consumers? That's where life-centered design comes in. An approach and a mindset that recognizes we live within broader ecosystems. And that our decisions impact not just people today, but future generations, non-human species, and the environment. Looking at asset mapping through this lens of life-centered design raises an important question. Is limiting participation to the immediate local community enough? Or are we missing critical actors and forces by drawing such tight boundaries around the process? Asset mapping is often conducted by asking local residents to identify what they see as community assets. That's valuable, but it can also miss the bigger picture. The interdependencies, the constraints, the enabling forces that lie outside that boundary. It's a bit like the fable of the blind man and the elephant. Each of the men touched a part of the elephant, the trunk, the leg, the ear, and described it as something else. A snake, a tree, a fan. Only by seeing the whole do we understand what we're dealing with. So how do we move beyond the partial view and begin seeing the full picture? As an example of an approach, I'd like to share with you a 3-step process. The 3 steps combine some powerful design tools that can help you uncover the whole system. This, in turn, can help you to engage more effectively with your community. Let's begin with the first step, creating a systems map. You can start by mapping the system and, importantly, map the strengths, not just the problems. For example, using IKEA as a case study, we looked at one of their best-selling products, the Poäng chair. It's that classic IKEA lounge chair with the curved wooden arms and tall back. To create a systems map, we identified the elements that are involved in producing, selling, using, and discarding the chair. For each element, we drew how it connects to the other elements. By doing this, we began to see patterns, like the more chairs IKEA sells, the cheaper they can produce them. Cheaper chairs means more sales, which in turn leads to a need to produce more chairs. You can do the same in a community setting. Take a local strength, a thriving community, a youth program, a specific gathering that combats loneliness and connects people, and start creating a systems map by asking these 6 questions. Who are the actors? Or who benefits or gets affected? What's involved? Where does it take place, or what's the context? When is this happening? When is it relevant? Why is it happening, and why is it relevant? And how does it happen or unfold? A good place to start is a simple mind map. Jotting down everything that comes to mind in response to these questions, even loosely connected ideas. Then build your systems map by selecting elements from the mind map and drawing connections between the elements. Indicate positive or negative relationships. By going beyond the immediately obvious relationships, we can uncover opportunities and unintended consequences. So going back to the IKEA example, the more chairs that are produced and the cheaper they are, the more likely they get discarded, leading to pollution and waste of valuable resources. Or, looking at an emerging opportunity, chairs that are no longer needed could be offered via a dedicated IKEA second-hand marketplace. As you uncover the web of connections, you might find that what seemed like a simple strength is actually held up by or threatened by forces far beyond what's visible. Once you have the systems map, I recommend using the middle-out approach to build a coalition. Let me explain what that looks like in practice. One limitation of conventional asset mapping is that it places all the burden of change on the community, without addressing systemic barriers. The middle-out approach helps fix this. This approach brings together voices from both the bottom and the top, creating a space where central actors facilitate a connection in the middle. Representatives from the bottom are citizens and community groups. Those from the top are government organizations and private businesses. The systems map can act as a good guide for identifying the relevant actors at each level. This often happens through participatory workshops, where different perspectives are shared and dialogue begins around what shared goals might look like. As a facilitator, your role is to hold space for honest dialogue and to help synthesize the different perspectives in the room. The workshops can bring diverse people together to share perspectives and experiences, identify a common agenda, define shared measures of progress. You'll find that bottom-up and top-down perspectives can clash at first, and that's okay. As facilitator, you can help everyone see their interdependence and points of connection. For example, we use the middle-out approach to explore shared perspectives on whether a community should rebuild or relocate after a flooding event. In the initial phase of the research, we used role-playing. We assigned participants different characters, like the mayor, a cafe owner, a local artist, and so on. The facilitator played an important role in moderating the discussion. People didn't necessarily arrive at a consensus, but that was also not the point. More importantly, having representatives from the bottom and the top around the table ensured that a wide range of perspectives was discussed. Before we move on to step 3, it's worth noting that steps 1 and 2 can be repeated iteratively. Doing this can help deepen understanding and strengthen the coalition over time. So, for example, you can begin with creating a systems map to better understand the context. This allows you to identify the relevant people to bring together as part of the middle-out approach. At this point, you can recreate the systems map with the coalition in the room. The new people at the table would bring in different perspectives and may offer insights previously missed. The new systems map may in turn allow you to identify previously missed actors that should be involved, and so on. And once you feel you've reached a point of diminishing returns, it's time for step 3. Using a futuring tool like backcasting to plan the path ahead. Futuring is essentially the practice of exploring, imagining, and planning for possible futures. It's used in strategic planning, organizational development, policy, and innovation to anticipate change, identify risks and opportunities, and make decisions that are resilient to uncertainty. With the newly formed coalition, you'll need a shared vision of where you're going, and futuring as an approach is the perfect fit for this. There are lots of tools as part of the futuring toolkit, and backcasting is one of my favorite ones. Here's how it works. Begin by asking everyone to imagine a preferred future, whether that future is tomorrow, next week, or 10 years from now. Create a timeline, and all the way on the far right, where the future is, write down what success looks like. Be specific. Who's thriving? What does the community look and feel like? Describe each critical element central to your story. Now come back to today, all the way on the left. For each of those future elements, what's the reality today? Then you start mapping out the middle bit. Work your way forwards to identify the transition steps between now and the future state. What are the things needed to shift the elements and help us reach our preferred future? Once completed, the backcasting canvas can act as a roadmap for change. This is the final approach I'm going to talk about. We used this approach during Sydney Climate Action Week, where the visioning began with Indigenous speakers sharing knowledge about country. Participants took these stories as a point of inspiration and imagined futures shaped by Indigenous knowledge. They then came back to the picture of today. A vastly different picture was formed on the backcasting timeline. Filling the gap in the middle allowed the group to think very practically about what was needed to transition towards their preferred future state. They mapped it all out right down to the very first step. For example, this could be a small pilot program made possible by a council grant. As the Ghanaian-Scottish academic and novelist Leslie Loco said, "The future is a place, not an idea." And that's exactly what backcasting helps us to do. Turn the future from an abstract idea into a navigable place. By mapping the gap between where we are now and where we want to be, we create a concrete pathway to step into that future. It's no longer a distant, intangible concept. It becomes something we can inhabit, test, and shape. Every small action, every pilot program, every decision along the way becomes part of constructing that place. Futuring, then, isn't just dreaming. It's building the streets, planting the trees, and lighting the lamps of a world we want to live in. You can enrich the backcasting process by developing actor cards, representing not only people and organizations, but also non-human actors like ecosystems, animals, and future generations. They can act as prompts to help workshop participants consider various perspectives as they undertake the backcasting task. In one workshop, an Indigenous participant suggested adding an ibis as an actor, reminding us that urban ecosystems involve more than just people. Together, these methods, systems mapping, middle-out engagement, and backcasting, don't just generate insights. They create a space for deeper collaboration and shared purpose. They equip us to do more than simply list assets. They help us understand the systems those assets live in, imagine what could be, and build coalitions to get there. When we move from human-centered to life-centered design, when we start with strengths, but also consider the systems they sit within, when we use tools that invite speculation, participation, and dialogue, we don't just map what exists, we map what matters. And in doing so, we create the conditions for communities and the systems around them to thrive. thank you for listening. I'm Martin Tomitsch, and this is Mapping What Matters.
You've been listening to Mapping What Matters, produced by UTS Impact Studios in collaboration with the UTS Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion and Glebe Youth Service. This series was made on Gadigal land and is hosted by me, Katie Blair. Our producer on this series is Jane Curtis of UTS Impact Studios. Our researchers and writers are Mitra Gusher, myself, Anusha Muller, and Tashinta Morris. Special thanks also to the Paul Ramsay Foundation who funded this research project.